Hello, everybody. Hello, and welcome to Side Hustle Ideas. I am Bill, the company's expert. Thank you for joining me today. This is the weekly live stream where we talk everything about entrepreneurship, starting your own business, starting your own company, or starting a side hustle, because that's the most accessible form that entrepreneurship takes. You don't have to quit your day job. You don't have to do anything extreme. You can just start this up in your spare time. With what resources you have available, including nothing, and learn about business that way. And if all goes according to plan, not only will you learn about business, but you'll be able to create a nice side income in the beginning. And it can lead on to bigger and better things down the road. So thank you for joining me today. The title of this episode is Marketing versus Accounting: The Causes of Growth and Decline. And this is episode number 64. I see there are 4 people here. Thank you for joining me today. We're going to get into this. Now, usually I have 2 topics, and I cover one, then I cover the other. But today, this is pretty much one topic, because the causes of growth and decline are very similar. It's the same principle. The absence of this thing causes a decline. The presence of it causes growth. So it's really convenient in that it's easy to remember. Before we get started, I want to thank all my Patreons, all my YouTube channel members. You guys are all awesome. My super thanks donors, my subscribers, and everyone who is here. You guys are awesome. You're doing some self-improvement, and that's why you're awesome. Okay, let's just launch into this. I'm going to talk about this for a little while, and we're going to be taking some questions a little bit later. So at any time, get into the chat and let me know what you're wondering about, what you're struggling with, and if you have any questions related to the main topic of what we're talking about, and I'll do my best to try and help you out. Okay, right. So the causes of growth and decline. In order to set this up, I have got to explain a couple of concepts. And some of these you learn when you're studying marketing and accounting and a few other of the business topics, whether you're taking this in business school or you're just learning them on your own. Sometimes they're covered, but a lot of times they're not, because these are higher level concepts that sort of sit on top of all those different areas. Okay, so they're not purely accounting, they're not purely marketing, and they're not purely strategy either. Okay, this is why I like talking about this stuff. And you'll have to excuse me today because I'm under the weather and I might accidentally go into a frenzy of coughing and stuff. So I'm going to try and control that as much as I possibly can. Now, I'm just wanting to find something. If I did have to hypothetically mute my microphone, what the hell do I have to do? I think this is it here. Right on. There's the mute button. Okay, it's very important to know where your mute button is if you should run into problems. And one final thing, if you're seeing this and you're watching it on a device, you should see a chat box somewhere in the vicinity of my face, either below it or beside it. Get in the chat, let me know what you're wondering about. And that's how we interact. Okay, without any further ado, let's get cracking on this. Okay, so accounting and marketing are 2 areas of business. And like a lot of the areas of business, they do not see eye to eye. They are completely different ways of looking at the same thing. Okay. Hopefully everybody understands accounting is the study of money in the past. Okay. So it's usually when we talk about accounting, we talk about, audits, what happened, where did the money go, how much money did we make? Excuse me. It also includes money in the present. Like if you've appropriated money, you've put it aside because you're expecting some expenses coming up, or you've incurred some expenses and incurred some costs, and you haven't yet paid them, but you've put money aside to cover them. Like all that's accounting. So what's going on right now, and more importantly, what happened in the past? That's accounting. Usually the people that specialize in accounting, obviously they have some great skills and value knowing about accounting, being able to clarify some of that stuff. However, they do tend to have, in my experience, one Achilles heel, which is that they do not understand marketing. They just don't get it at all. They don't understand the value derivation of the business, where the value comes from. What is it that makes people want to buy this thing and pay the price that you're asking? Accountants, for all their talent and skills and however much you need them, they tend to not understand that. And they also tend to trivialize this importance, which is probably even more serious. Marketing, on the other hand, marketing deals with the study of customers. That's what marketing is. It's the study of customers or potential customers. And therefore, it's about understanding who would want to buy your thing and what makes those people tick. What are they looking for? How do they perceive things? What are their wants? What are their needs? How strong are those wants and needs? What are the substitutes? What's the perception of you and your competitors from the perspective of your potential customers? All of that is marketing, right? Now, obviously, you need both of these to make a business successful, right? Marketing, if I had to pick one area of business and someone put a gun to my head and said, you have to pick one area and only go with that and eliminate all others, I would pick marketing. I think that personally, in my experience, working in large businesses and small businesses, marketing is the most important area. If you don't have marketing, you don't have anything. Everything else you can possibly get by without it, usually very poorly, but it's technically possible. However, if you don't have a customer, the game's over. Like, the business is the science and art of making money, and if you don't have a customer, it's over, right? So marketing's pretty damn important. Now, the problem is that people on the marketing side of things, for all their talents and skills and however much you need them and however much their perspective is important, they tend to sometimes have a blind spot in the accounting department. They would love to spend money hand over fist in the continual pursuit of trying to attract more customers and please the customers that you have. You want to delight them. They tend to forget that we do have to pay for everything. So as a result, marketing and accounting, in my experience, they've been continually and perpetually at odds with each other. They just do not appreciate the other side of the fence, and they trivialize the other side of the fence, and they regard themselves as by far the most important thing. And as we all know, or hopefully we all know, that's not the case. In order for a business to work, you have to be able to look at what you're doing from a variety of perspectives. Accounting is one, marketing is another, there's many others. Operations, quality, the human resources side of things, like the conditions for your own workforce, how you treat your employees, blah, blah, blah. The administrative side of things, regulatory, legal side of things. There's many different perspectives. The economic side of things, like in terms of microeconomics or macroeconomics, where you fit into the economy and how you run yourself according to those principles. There's so many different perspectives. I mean, we haven't even got into ethics and safety and public relations, and there's many different ways of looking at a business, and when you wear those different hats, you would prioritize different things, right? The two by far if you see what I'm saying, the two by far most important things are marketing and operations, and then the third one is the financial element, which is a big chunk of that is accounting. So this is where we run into problems. So now that we've set that up and we know what marketing is, we know what accounting is, okay, and we've established that these two usually do not see eye to eye. They think in terms of almost polar opposites all the time. Let's talk about what leads to growth and what leads to decline, okay? Okay, now we're going to introduce a couple of concepts that sit on top of the study of marketing and of accounting and several others. So they're not exclusive to any one of these areas. So as a result, you usually don't learn about these when you study any one area. It's only when you start putting things together that concepts like this sort of come into play. Okay, Now, in the United States, traditionally, the work of many outfits, including the Boston Consulting Group, who's been leading the charge on this for several years, has been a certain metric. Okay, they maintain that this metric is the most important metric in your entire business. It's the thing that your success depends on. If you score well at this, you will be successful one way or another. If you score poorly at this, you will not be successful one way or another. And that is what they call this metric of customer relative perceived quality. Okay, it's a real mouthful. And I've been talking about this for years. This has been around for years. I think a lot of people have come up with fancier, more compact names for it. But I'm a bit old school, so I use the sort of the lingo from the 1970s and 80s when this was making the rounds. So this thing, once again, is called customer relative perceived quality. So it's very, very simple. It's got this complicated name. It's actually very simple. What it is you go to your customers or potential customers, okay? And imagine if you could give them a survey and you said, this is what you say. You say, write down when it comes to this problem you have, this thing that would necessitate you buying a product or service. When it comes to this, write down the top 10 providers of this, companies that sell a version of this, and write them in the order that you think is like best to worst. So the number 1 would be the best provider of this, and then number 10 would be the worst of the top 10, okay? So for example, let's say you ask somebody, you want to listen to music on the go. What would be your number 1 company that would be the best solution provider for that? And a lot of people, would not surprise me if a lot of people wrote down number 1 Apple or number 1 Spotify, something like that, right? And then you go down the list of maybe, Microsoft would be down towards number 10 or something like that, right? So that's in terms of what you think is best, okay, gets to be number 1. Now, obviously, the term best, this is completely subjective, right? Okay, completely subjective. Every customer is going to have their own definition of what best means to them, right? You're not going to have a universal definition, right? There are many things that could be included within that, right? For example, the price might be a big factor. People that are really on a budget, they would consider a cheaper solution to be better, right? People who are rich, they have a lot of money to spend. Price is not really going to be the main consideration. They're going to maybe regard quality of the solution to be number 1, or reliability, or efficiency, or the safety of it, or how, like, the coolness factor, or the fact that it's part of an ecosystem that then enables you to sort of do a lot of other things too. Number of features might be more important to somebody, or other people might not care about the number of features. They only want one feature, but they want it to work really, really well, right? So as you can appreciate, everyone has a different definition of best, right? So coming back to this metric of customer relative perceived quality, all you do is you would go to your customers, you say, write down the top 10 solution providers of whatever this is, whatever business you're in order of, like, number 1 is the best, and then you go down the list. The second best would be number 2, right? And then you add up all those results, right? And consistently, you might find that, say, a company like Apple, when it comes to, listening to music or something, they would be regarded as number 1 of all the options that people have, right? If you're talking about, like, mobile phones, smartphones, who do you regard as, the best solution provider for smartphone? People could make a top 10 list. Maybe Apple would be up there somewhere. Maybe Google, like they make the Pixel, Samsung, like, what order would you put those in, right? And you add them all up and you say, this is what our customers think, right? Now, where are we in this list? Are we at the top, or are we so far down that we're not even on the list. We're not even in the top 10, right? And what Boston Consulting Group and a lot of other people that study this stuff, really smart people that devote their whole working lives to studying this stuff, what they've said is that this is the most important metric. If you can score high on this metric, on this test, okay, you will be very profitable. And make no mistake, they're not saying you will be successful as a generic thing. They're saying you will be profitable financially, okay? If you are the best solution provider, you can lower your prices and sell a lot of units, or you can raise your prices, you charge a real premium, and you sell the same number of units as maybe your competitors, but you make a higher profit margin on those units. So one way or another, you're going to be more profitable than your competitors if you score high on this metric. Okay? Now, as you're probably guessing, if I haven't completely put you to sleep yet, this is what leads to growth and to financial success. Okay? Now, this is obviously this metric, it's a combination of customer perception of reality and reality. It takes into account many different things, like we talked about, the cost or the price of the product, you know, the features, the efficiency, the quality of, you know, how reliable it is, how good of a job it does. Is it available everywhere, or is it only available in certain places? Like, there's so many factors that this includes, but what's built into the metric is those factors have been sorted by how important they are to the customer, right? And a lot of companies fall into the problem where they think, oh, our customers care about this, say, price, when in reality, that might not be accurate. Yeah, they care about price, but it turns out they care about this, you know, the reliability of this feature or something much more, or they care about the coolness factor much more, or they care about the availability of the product much more, you know. And this is where, you know, if you have less than perfect information, intelligence on how your customers perceive things, you're going to get these wrong, right? That's why this metric incorporates all of that, right? So, so that's the number one metric. So people that score high on this, they tend to lead to profitability. People that score low on this tend to lead to a lack of profitability. And usually it's real warning signs if you don't score very high in this. Like, imagine you did this for automakers, people that make cars, companies that make cars, right? You know, who would be your number one, right? And this is all cars, right? So, I mean, you could have Lamborghini on there, right? They might score very high on coolness factor and performance, maybe not quite as high on reliability and price, right? Or Toyota could be on there. They score a lot better on price and quality, maybe a little bit lower on coolness factor, but how do you know what type of customers there are when what each one cares about? All you say is, like, just rank them 1 to 10, your top automakers, whatever criteria you want, whatever you regard as best, right? You might even put DeLorean in there, right? Something that, you know, has a lot of negative points about it, but hey, maybe the coolness factor is there. I don't know. Especially if it comes with a flux capacitor. So this is like sort of the universal metric. So if you want to know how you're doing and what area you should work on, this is a starting point. You give this to your customers or potential customers, and then understanding why they've answered the way they have is a huge factor in understanding what you might need to do, okay? And what area should you improve? Sometimes your product is perfect, but the perception is very poor, right? And that can be caused not by you, but could even be caused by a competitor slagging you off in the market, right? So, I mean, you know, you don't have to change anything about yourself other than maybe do a marketing campaign or do something to increase the poor market perception of what you're doing, right? Okay, so this is the number one metric. So this is what you should be paying attention to. Now, I guess you can split this into two kind of topics. There's the causes of growth and decline, which I've kind of talked about, and there's also marketing versus accounting. Now, let's see, how can I structure this? Oops, I didn't want to do that. Here we go. Okay, I've got my notes here. They're all completely garbled like usual, so that's why I'm waffling. Haven't really got much questions yet, so if you're watching this and you're wondering anything, let me know in the chat, and I'll take some of those. Okay, so we talked about customer relative perceived quality. Okay, everybody knows that. Now here's like a standard, typical business trade-off, right? A contradiction, and that would be, say, product quality versus cost. Usually they go like this, right? You know, when your quality goes up, usually your costs go up at the same time, which is bad, right? But if your quality goes, if you lower your costs, a lot of times your quality goes down too, which is bad, right? So they tend to go in the opposite direction from what you want. And it's a trade-off, right? Now, while we do have innovative people who can help us to improve both at the same time, which is ideally what you would want, right? You'd want your quality going up at the same time as your costs are going down. Usually that it doesn't happen like that, but it can with innovation, right? Okay. The problem is they're opposites. Now, what I'm sure you guys have seen many times is a company comes out with a really, really good product, and it's a tremendous smash hit, and they take the market by storm, and they become the leader, the market leader. I remember a company, DeWalt, did that with power tools. The company Dyson did that with vacuum cleaners and stuff like that. The company KitchenAid did that with, like, the kitchen equipment, like mixers and things like this. And in each of those cases, as far as I can tell, I'm not really an expert in them, after achieving this amazing success where they got a lot of success based on the fact that they had a very high scoring product on this metric, customer relative perceived quality, they were perceived as the best by many customers. Doesn't mean they were the cheapest, doesn't mean they were the coolest, doesn't mean they were the most reliable, doesn't mean that they were, the most efficient and all the rest of it, but they were perceived as being the best. Usually it's because they were cool and their product did what it did very well, right? After this success, they then, for want of a better term, let the accountants in. And the accountants promptly worked on cost structure. That's what accountants do. They like to think they work on efficiency. Sometimes they do, but a lot of times not really. They work on cost. So getting your costs down. And a lot of times that's done by cheaping out on stuff, cheaping out on components, cheaping out on procedure, etc. Okay. In well-run companies, it doesn't usually involve that, but unless you're careful, that's usually the form it takes. So as a result, these companies then went into a decline because they decided to, how can I put this? In layman's terms, they nickel and dime themselves. They tried to cut corners, reduce their costs, and they did reduce their costs. So if all things are equal, you would have your profit per unit would go up. The problem, of course, is that as you cut costs, if it does affect the perceived product quality, which in the case of these companies, I believe it certainly has, your sales volume then declines because you're not perceived as being the best anymore, or you're not as good as you were, so therefore you don't sell as much quantity. And if you keep your price the same, you will have a higher profit per unit, but you sell less units, right? And in the end, what you're left with, if you kept on that track, you're left with an inferior product that's sort of the product has been altered down to a price, but it no longer has a competitive edge because customers don't perceive it as being particularly good. And as a result, your profitability steeply declines. So the key to doing this is to keep that metric up, customer relative perceived quality. How do we do this? We do it by doing a good job in whatever business you're in whichever way your customers perceive as important. Okay. Okay, it's as simple as that. There you go. I mean, I could go on, but I was hoping that people would have questions. I've talked for about half an hour on this, so if you do have any questions, let me know. I'd like to answer questions rather than just waffle on about this stuff. One element of this is that for managers, if you're a manager or you're the person driving the strategic direction of a company, it's very hard to keep your eye on the prize with this stuff. It's very, very tempting to cut costs and just use that as a strategy to keep your profitability up. Unfortunately, that leads to short-term gain, but long-term loss. If you compromise the quality of your product so that it scores lower on this scale of customer relative perceived quality, you end up losing by a variety of factors. You might have to give discounts on your product / the price to keep the volume up. And when you do that, you lose because your profit per unit goes down. So, and it's a losing game. You can't juggle the numbers that way. The only way to really do it is to understand your customer and score very highly on that scale. Because if you do, you can always charge a premium and you'll grow with a better profit margin than your competitors. Or you keep the price the same, you keep the price competitive, and you just outsell your competitors in terms of quantity, right? So whichever way you slice it, you win. So really, this is just one discussion of this one metric and how universally important this metric is. Why don't people do this? Because a big problem is that businesses are divided into departments, and no one department exclusively deals with this particular metric. And the way to implement it is not implemented solely with one department. It's a sort of company-wide initiative that drives this. And that's why you need very strong leadership from the top that's spanning all these different departments in order to be able to pull this off. And let's face it, a lot of companies just do not have that, and they are not structured to do that. If you wondered why there's a lot of companies that come out of nowhere to tremendous success that are driven by a very strong personality, usually a founder, right? An entrepreneurial type founder, right? But then when they leave or they step back, the company kind of loses its edge, right? This is one partial explanation for why that is, right? Because the original founder might have had the clout to be able to tell everyone company-wide, okay, you now need to do this initiative, and have them obey, right, and follow it, even if they don't see a lot of the process. Whereas, if you lose that founder with all the clout, people just work in the accounting department. They do whatever the chief accountant says or the CFO says, and they don't really see outside of their world. They don't follow any initiatives that span other departments. They just follow their own initiatives, right? Okay, so we have a question. So Mariah G says, hello, Mariah. Thank you for participating. I keep hearing about BOI for those that have started the business. Could you please explain this? Thank you. BOI. You'll have to break out acronyms for me. I don't do well with acronyms. I get comments from people all over the world talking about all manner of industries. So I'm going to do very professionally here, just so you know, I'm going to do a Google search. I don't come up with anything for BOI in a Google search. I'm just going to do BOI business metric. Okay. Beneficial ownership information. Is that what you're referring to? If you could clarify what BOI stands for, this thing that you're wondering about, because that's what I'm pulling up here. Beneficial ownership information. Okay, let's hear. I'm going to share this with you guys. Let's see if we can do this here. Sure, whatever. Okay, what beneficial ownership information reporting means to a small... First of all, this is a modern thing, and it's not super widespread. Okay, now, without knowing anything about it, I would conclude it's usually a flavor of the month type thing. But let's see what they're saying here. It's a new reporting requirement. So I assume this is in the United States, right? See, I'm not in the US. Okay, so this is a financial reporting requirement in the States for LLCs. Okay, yeah, well, this has nothing to do with kind of what I'm talking about. Whether your business is set up to succeed or fail has nothing to do with different metrics, the financial metrics, okay? Mariah says, yes, I'm in the USA. Okay, yeah. So in the States, or in a lot of countries, I mean, there's a lot of regulations to do with the reporting of the accounting information. At the very least, you have to do, you have to report what's happening financially with your organization for taxes, because your business will, it may not necessarily pay taxes depending on how you've structured it and set it up. If you're a proprietorship or a partnership, you won't, the business itself won't pay taxes, but you would have to report it so that they know how much income tax to charge you and all this kind of stuff. In addition, if you're a larger organization, let's say you're set up as a corporation, okay, so your business is paying taxes, it's its own legal entity. The government needs to know, all about what you're doing in terms of not just taxes, but, you're employing people. So, that's another aspect of it. And then there's a ton of other stuff that kicks in if you're like a public company. Like if people can come in and buy, a stake of owning the company, right? So you have to disclose this. It's usually filed with the articles of incorporation when you incorporate. That you have to say who the owners are, and if there's any change in that, you have to report that. I'm trying to sort of give you the universal version of this because where I am in Canada, the exact laws are different from what in the States and in other places like the EU. So, but that's what's going on here. So if you're a really large organization, then you have to worry about stuff like this, okay? Like your reporting requirements. For most people that are starting a side hustle or starting their own business, I would recommend that you do as little of this administrative stuff as possible. So I would keep it as a proprietorship, certainly until you make enough money doing it to replace any kind of day job you have. And then at that point, if you can keep it a proprietorship, I would recommend that you do so until you get so big that you're employing, say, 10 people. Then I would say, then it's time to incorporate for sure, certainly by that point. And then you need to comply with all the reporting requirements for your country. And this is one of them. But what you send to the government has nothing to do with, whether your business model is going to work or not. That has absolutely nothing to do with it. They don't care about that stuff. They don't interfere with that stuff. You are free to do highly sensible, profitable things, or you are free to do highly idiotic, stupid things. And, you know what I mean? As long as you're disclosing what income you make and all this kind of stuff, right? And the ownership, where it's going and all this kind of stuff. Okay, so reporting requirements are not really directly part of what I'm talking about today. I'm talking about just how do you make money, meaning how do you get a lot of people to want to buy your offering, your product or service, and want to pay the price that you've chosen to charge for it, Okay. That will result in financial success. Okay. Once you have that, reporting is not an issue. None of the administrative stuff is an issue. It's just the necessary evil that comes along with being in business. It's a cost of having to be in business, right? Mariah says, thank you for your help. I appreciate the advice. I have a side hustle, but will wait to form an LLC. Yeah. What I would recommend in general is if you're doing a side hustle, try and minimize the administrative side of it, including the reporting stuff. You see, the way a lot of people think when they get into this is they don't think of like their concerns right now. Instead, they think of this grand scheme they have, this multi-year odyssey where they build an empire and they plan world domination. In order to do that, your business is going to be a corporation. You're going to have a legal department. You're going to have an accounting department. You're going to have a reporting department. You're going to have, you know what I mean? And so as part of almost a fantasy, they enjoy sort of putting the infrastructure for that in place, usually far in advance of when you really need to do it, right? Because in their mind, it kind of legitimizes what they're doing and makes them feel like they're legit and they're on their way and all this. The only real thing you should be worrying about is your revenue, is and your profitability, of course, but the amount of money coming in. That's what distinguishes a real, actual business operation from a hobby or a fantasy. You know what I mean? That's the only thing that matters. And you can have $500,000 coming in and still be unincorporated. You might not even file registered a name of your business with the government. You know what I mean? Like you haven't done any of that stuff. And I would recommend, like I kind of said previously, I'd recommend that you hold off on that stuff as much as possible. Number one, it's work that doesn't have any direct benefit. Number two, it also ties your hands. So if, for example, if you select a name, that's your name, you know what I mean? You're not in this business to research names and make sure there's no competing company anywhere in the world. You're just here to make money, and if you do any of that stuff, work on the name, it's like a necessary evil that just, you got to do it because it's what enables you to make money, right? So, obviously details will vary depending on what you choose to do. If you're in an area that's particularly risky legally, you could get sued, or something, then that will obviously affect what you do here. You know what I mean? Like, for example, there's people that start up construction companies. Let's think traditional small business, like it's a one-person business. They start it up in a day. They get their first customer on day one or day two, and they're already making money. They've already got money rolling in the first week, right? They haven't done any of this stuff. And if they do it, it'll be once they start employing like 30 people, you know what I mean? And they're that size, right? And generally those businesses, when they do that, it goes better. It's the opposite of the startup founder or wannabe startup founder that does all the administrative stuff, but then doesn't have a customer and never gets one. You know what I mean? So your only focus should be making money. It's the make or break. I've known a lot of people that they live in this world where they haven't really made any money. That they always think that comes later. Like they've been at it for like a year or 2 years. They think, it comes later. Right? And unfortunately, you can end up deluding yourself, right? There's actually very quick ways of bringing money in if you're focused on that. Right? And we've talked about that on this channel a lot of times before. Like, for example, almost a universal thing you can do is before you've created the product or service, you can already be doing the marketing and almost the sales side and say like, hello, I'm offering this. If anybody wants it, pay up front and then we'll send it to you or we'll provide it for you. Right? I mean, that universal model, that's kind of how it operates when you walk into a store, right? You have to pay up front, and then you're allowed to leave the store with the product. Or you order something from Amazon, right? You pay for it up front with your credit card or whatever, and then they assure you that they've put it into the mail, and then you will receive it in a certain number of weeks, right? Or days, right? So, now, if you put this thing out there and say, does anybody want one of these? It costs this much, pay up front. And nobody steps forward and says, I'd like to buy one, right? That's very important information coming in about your market. That's a form of market research, right? If you put those feelers out there before you've really created anything, and already 50 people step forward and say, I'd like to order one, here's my money, take it, right? That tells you something else very important. That's direct information coming in from the market saying, there is a demand for this. They are willing to pay that price, and they're committed. They're standing out with their wallet open. Here you go. Here's take my money. I want this thing. So the other advantage of that, obviously, is that now you've got money up front. You've got sort of the seed capital, or whatever you want to call it, to finance the creation of the service or the initial run of, like, the initial batch of your product, right? So you don't have to raise capital for that. Your customers have given it to you in advance. Here's the money I needed to make 100 units of this product that I could make, right? And fund the design of the product, if you haven't even done that yet, right? So, there's always that. At the end of the day, you can always do that and get to the get to the revenue stage sooner. Mariah says, you're right. I've been thinking about this for weeks and needed an answer confirmation on this. Yeah, there's so much administrative stuff to do. Like, there's so much administrative stuff you could do, right? You could register everything. Think of the name thing, okay? Even if you're selecting a name, you could decide to really be thorough, shall we say, on this, and you could spend a lot of time thinking of a name, and then a lot more time researching, are there other companies that already have taken that name in different regions, right? Like, you could get lost in the details of just that, right, before you even start. And the other problem is that is taking you away from focusing on what's important, which is, what do I offer and how do I sell it in order to make money, right? That's the only, that should be the only thing you focus on. And this administration is taking you away from thinking about that. The other thing it takes people away from this is raising capital, raising, financing for whatever you're trying to do. It could be for starting up your company, or it could be for, like, some expenses you have that, in order to create, I don't know, a batch of products, or be able to provide a service. You need to set up your initial operation, and you know what I mean? I did a video that didn't go down that well, actually, a long time ago. It was called "Don't Be a Middleman," and I didn't mean middleman in the sense that you offer a product that sits between, or you provide a service that sits between the customer and their supplier. I don't mean that. I mean, something I've seen several times is where a startup founder, an entrepreneur, they figure, okay, I'm going to hire someone to develop my product for me. So I'm going to pay some employees to create this for me, or I'm going to contract it out to another company. They'll create my product for me. Okay. And then I'm going to pay another bunch of people over here to sell that product. I don't have to worry about selling it because I'm going to hire these sales employees, or I'm going to farm it out to another company that will do my marketing and sales for me, right? And then all I have to do is go raise capital, get it from like a source, and then sort of do this. You can't see my beautiful hand gestures here, like just doing this. Maybe you can on this mic, right? That kind of thing. And I'll just sit on top of these different operations and coordinate, right? And they end up concerning themselves with raising capital. That's all they do. And number one, that takes them away from actually working on their business, which is the biggest problem of all. And secondly, it's a failing business model. These people will never be as efficient as they would be if they were all in-house. You know what I mean? If you're paying people by the hour to do an entrepreneurial type thing, right? They'll never be as efficient or as productive as what you could do yourself or what you could do with dedicated founders, right? You know, and it's an unproven thing. You don't even know if you're going to be able to pull this off. So there's all kinds of problems with that. And that's what I meant. Don't be a middleman. Don't just get money and then pay people to do the different aspects of your business. That's a model that's been shown to be doomed to failure, unfortunately. There's no substitute for doing the work yourself. Anyway, hopefully that was helpful, Mariah. You said some very nice things there, so hopefully that worked. Yeah, so this is what I consider to be the heart of all business. That metric, customer relative perceived quality, is the number one metric in all of business as far as I'm concerned. So if you've never heard of this before, look into it. As I said, in the United States, Boston Consulting Group, BCG, or whatever they call themselves now, they've done a lot of work on this in the 80s and 90s. And it's, as far as I know, it's kind of the core of their business consulting arm these days. They talk about this. You know, this is taught in business schools, but not really as part of any one topic. They loosely lump it into strategy sometimes. But this came out, the reason they came up with this, I mean, none of this is original to me. I'm just borrowing from the people that have got PhDs in business and that have done a lot of data-based research studying this stuff. They looked for, they looked at businesses. They looked at big businesses and small businesses. They looked at businesses that are pure play, which means they only do one thing. And they looked at the opposite of that, which are businesses that are like conglomerates. You know, they do many, many different unrelated things, right? They looked at every industry. And they looked at the financial performance of all these businesses because everyone informs the government of their finances. So the financial information is out there. It exists, you know, and what these researchers did over decades was they studied all this and they correlated the results with what strategy has that business undertaken, because they wanted to find like a correlation between, you know, is there a strategy that leads to profitability and is there a strategy that doesn't lead to profitability? They wanted to know when companies do this, it tends to make them profitable. When companies do this other thing, it tends to eat away at their profits. They wanted to find that, and they did find some stuff. And they looked at they isolated several factors that, you know, when companies do this, it tends to lead to financial success, and when companies do that, it tends not to. And so this was done, as I said, it was done over several decades, starting in the 60s. And at one point, this study was part of General Electric. It was like General Electric think tank. I think that's how they started. And then it was independent, and then it was sort of taken over by Boston Consulting Group. And they've published their findings for this, you know, so you can read it and you can read all these lessons. And there's been several books that have been written about this, about this particular study. The problem is with the world of business is there's so much crap. There's so much misinformation. Anybody who has their own crackpot opinion tries to package that as if it's like a scientific principle. And the vast majority of those aren't. They're just fancy, nice sounding theories that are not based on anything. So it's very hard to sort the wheat from the chaff. But if you do want to learn this, there's books that talk about it. I've shared those in other live streams and in my course and stuff. Pure Heart Ukulele Club says Six Sigma. No. Six Sigma is something else. I'm a master black belt in Six Sigma. It's not to do with this, okay? Don't be fooled by the fact that the metric I was referring to was called customer relative perceived quality, okay? This is not quality in the sense that most people think about it. When you have like a quality department or a quality inspector, they're talking about something very specific. They're talking about something called conformance quality, and there have been many initiatives that deal with that. Like Six Sigma is one of them, right? So, you know, I mean, like Six Sigma, it's all about defects, right? You know, like that's what it is. It's basically applied statistics that have been applied in industry a certain way. You know, and I used to know all the theory. Like as I said, I'm a master black belt in Six Sigma. I was a green belt, then a black belt, then a master black belt, where you teach it. And I mean, it's not that it's not valid. It's definitely valid. But what I'm trying to say is that Six Sigma solves a different problem. It has nothing to do with what we're talking about here. Six Sigma doesn't have anything to do directly with profitability, right? It's to do with conformance quality, and in particular, the elimination or reduction of defects, right? So it's a different kind of thing. It's more related to things like ISO quality, which is a different flavor, and things like lean, which is, it has this, lean has the same goal, but it's a completely different methodology. It's based on people processes rather than applied statistics and all this kind of stuff. So they deal with conformance quality, and what I'm talking about here is not about conformance quality. It's about profitability, right? And the sense that that metric works, customer relative perceived quality, that's quality in the sense that, you know, what customers care about. And as you can appreciate, different customers will care about different things. Some may not know anything about a product, but they've heard bad things, in which case it becomes a public relations issue and a marketing issue. Other times, they've bought a product and the product has failed because it's defective, and that is a conformance quality issue, right? Other times, they regard something as of inferior quality because it's priced very cheap. And there's, in some customers' minds, especially if you're dealing with consumers, there's a correlation between, you know, the price of something and its perceived conformance quality, right? If something is priced really cheap, they regard it to be a cheap product, right? So that's what I'm talking about here, not conformance quality. I think the original study, or put it this way, the original book that I read, it was given to me by, I got a job as one of the executive managers of a mid-sized company in my hometown many, many years ago. And the owner of the company took me aside one day, and like I had said something like, you know, dude, like, teach me, you know, I want to learn what you know. And he had said, well, here's a good start. Read this book. And he gave me this book. It was a copy of this book. And I think it's out of print now, but it was called PIMS, PIMS. I'll see if I can find it on Google for you right now. And if I can, I'll see if I can share my screen here. Let's see here. Okay. No, that's not what it is. Let's see, where is it? Like, I talked about this in one of my courses. Profit, like, is it impact marketing? Was that? No, it was. I don't think this was the acronym. It might be. Here we go. Yeah. Okay. Yes, this is what I was referring to here. Profit impact of marketing strategy. So I don't know if it gives you the name of the book. No, but this was basically what it is. So if you can, you could start out with this and see if it's been written into a book. The problem is, like a lot of things, is that they've added to it over the years. And I'm not sure what they've added to it. It could have been good stuff, in which case this would be a little bit outdated, or It could be bad stuff like they have for other things where they've just tacked on a bunch of BS to it. And then that dilutes it. Then sort of the reputation of it falls from favor because it includes good stuff and bad stuff. And that's not a good thing. So you can't rely on it. So all I know is that that's what it started out as. And like, as I say, still today, Boston Consulting Group still like basically is evangelizing this stuff. Today they've changed some of the terms and they've updated it a little bit, but it's the same principles. The stuff really doesn't change. You can try to measure customer satisfaction, very loosely speaking, quality and value. No, it's not very loose. I mean, like in marketing, this is what they do, right? This is, they put tons of effort and money behind this. And, it's just that a lot of businesses on a sort of casual basis, they try and do this stuff because they're told that this stuff is important. They also believe it's important, but yet, they don't want to pay the price to do it properly. So they just do a sort of token default thing. And like, for example, when you go to a restaurant, right? And, the restaurant may have those little survey cards. Like it might have a suggestion box, right? And they'll have the little survey cards. And when is the only time people fill out the surveys or put suggestions in the suggestion box? Do most people do it? No. It's like 1% of all times customers go in that you get a suggestion or something. And it's always polarizing. The only time people would ever want to give feedback officially to the restaurant is when they're absolutely delighted with the food or they're absolutely outraged by the food and service, right? So if you looked at the results of these surveys or the suggestions, you get like a sort of polarizing kind of result. And it would suggest that 50% of the time people are absolutely delighted with you and 50% of the time people are absolutely hate you and they're never coming back, right? So you get a very distorted view of what most of your customers actually think, because most of your customers, it's going to be like a bell curve. Most of them will be like, yeah, it's fine. It's all right. It didn't blow me away, but it's adequate, right? And then only a few people will be outraged and only a few people will be absolutely delighted, right? So you get very skewed results. So this is a typical example of like what a lot of businesses would do is they say, well, we have a suggestion box to get data back from what our clientele thinks of our product and service, right? And it's like, no, yeah, you're technically doing it, but the quality of the data you're receiving is very poor. You really can't base anything off it, right? So you can measure this stuff quite well. It's just that it's not easy. You have to do a lot of work and you have to go to great lengths to do it, right? Most companies do a terrible job at this because it's regarded, unfortunately, usually it's regarded as like an afterthought. It's just, some token thing that you do so that you can say you're doing it, but we don't really care, really, right? That's kind of the general attitude towards these things. But this is not what you would do when you're starting up a business, like what we're talking about here with entrepreneurship. You will care deeply about what people think of the existing solutions out there and what you could do and what your solution is, right? And the secret to really understanding what they think about it and how they perceive things will lead you to success, right? Let's see here. Pure Heart Ukulele Club says Six Sigma is about efficiency. Well, kind of, yeah. What is the name of the study? Yeah, impact rather than good video. Take care. Okay, right on. Well, I see there are 16 people here. Thank you for joining me today. Hopefully you got something out of this. Let me know if you would like me to cover different topics or any specific thing. This is my vehicle for answering people's questions. So don't send me an email. Don't leave comments on my videos and stuff, like this is kind of how to get an answer to anything from me about anything you're working on or you're struggling with. I will be back next week with another episode of Side Hustle Ideas. And if you do want to go further, check out that course right there, the $100 MBA. I created that for people that want to learn business. It's probably the best bang for the buck you can get for learning business because it teaches you everything that you would learn in a traditional MBA program at university. And that's an entire program. So, if you took this and you really went deep, that's what you can get out of it. What you do get is you get essentially a reading list, and you can buy the books on places like Amazon for like literally $5 if you get an older edition of stuff. And I provide a lot of videos. I guide you through it. You can skim the material and just get a sort of basic overview of it, or you could go in depth. Or because you're covering all these different areas of business, you can go in depth in one or two areas if that's what you're interested in, and then skim the others. So you can use it any way you want. You can learn this on your own schedule, on your own terms. And that's why I created it, because this knowledge is out there. You don't need to pay someone 5 figures to essentially read you a book that's been around for 200 years, right? So that's why I created this. So check that out if you are interested. There's a link in the description, and that'll take you to either the course, or if you want to learn about the course and specifically like answer a bunch of questions about what you're getting into and how it works, I have a video on that too. Okay, thanks very much. You guys are awesome. I will see you next week for another episode of Side Hustle Ideas. I will be back in an hour to do another live stream about job search. So if you're into that, come back in an hour and we'll get into it. Okay, take care.